Yep. Real bad too. Uh-oh.
Call the meeting to order. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one board member absent this evening. She's out of town for work. Board Member Parker. Moving on to the approval of the minutes of the meetings held January 27th and February 5th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. There was no one signed up to address the board. We'll move on to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. On to the good news report. Dr. Maher.
Thank you. I want to make this official and stand in front of you tonight. As you know, the role of a school board member can be about as diverse as the students a school district serves. Each of you is elected to serve and represent all 24,000 students in the Sioux Falls School District. As busy professionals with jobs and children of your own, that's no easy task, but you accepted that call to serve. Next week, the week of February 17th through the 21st, is South Dakota School Board Recognition Week. Since we don't have a regularly scheduled meeting next week, we wanted to take time tonight to honor your commitment as an active and effective member of the Sioux Falls School Board by highlighting some of the work you've done in this past year. Since last year, at about this time, you have received recommendations to name 2 new schools currently under construction, Thomas Jefferson High School and Ben Rifle Middle School. You approved the school colors and mascots for each of those schools. You participated in the groundbreakings and have further approved bids and awards for construction for many school improvements that were included in the historical $190 million bond passed by voters in September of 2018. You have overseen the budget and made recommendations to expand reading interventions in our elementary schools. You have participated in the annual audits to ensure that the district's long-standing fiscal responsibility remains intact. You have approved classroom curriculum. You have served as advocates for teachers in both local and statewide education conversations. You've represented the Sioux Falls School District on local, state, and national boards and committees. You've reviewed and approved dozens of policies. That's no understatement. You've closely monitored, supported, and kept the district accountable to the strategic plan in an effort to help us better meet our mission. And since the start of 2020, you have upped your game on meeting attendance as a community task force looks at redrawing school attendance areas within the Sioux Falls School District boundaries. All of this takes a great deal of time and extra effort. And at the end of the day, we know you do not receive the public recognition or thanks that you well deserve. Tonight, we offer that recognition and thanks in advance of the statewide celebration, and we hope you know what a great impact you're making on those 24,000 students and our 3,400 staff members. It is hard work. We appreciate you, and we know you know it's important work. Thank you. Board President Mickelson, would you come up and receive the plaque on behalf of the board?
Thank you, Dr. Maher. We all do this because we have a passion for the Sioux Falls School District and the public schools here, but we do appreciate this because we often hear the negatives, so it's good to hear a little pat on the back once in a while. We appreciate it.
I didn't put in there, but I understand you are also maybe looking for a new superintendent as well. So you have a lot going on.
Moving on to conflicts of interest. There were no new conflicts of interest presented to the board. On to approval of the consent agenda items 11A through E. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. On to 12A, claims to Sanford Health. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with 2 abstentions from Board Member Ryder and Board Member Mickelson. On to reports of the superintendent.
All right. We have 2 reports tonight as reports of the superintendent. The first report I talked a little bit about in the opening remarks, and that is a strategic plan update. Here to deliver that strategic plan update tonight is Doug Morrison.
Good evening. This is kind of the traditional time of year where we provide an update to our strategic plan, more of a metrics view than probably from a project view. I think earlier in the year we kind of told you what the different initiatives and things that we were working on in the district. This is sort of a wrap-up of our strategic plan indicators and how we're sort of tracking against those. You recall back, hardly seems possible, but we started this process back in the fall of 2015. So almost 5 years ago is when we started out and doing community sessions and putting a strategic plan together. In February of 2017, we completed the plan, in which case we put together our priorities and goals, and that plan really covers a 5-year period. We divided the plan, if you recall, into 4 pieces, which is how we track it today: student outcomes, school climate and culture, staff, and community engagement. Those are the 4 pillars of our plan. And then we have measures under each one of those priorities. So all totaled, we have 23 measures that cross 4 categories. And I'll go through each one of these, but again, they fall into priority area 1, student outcomes, priority area 2, school climate and culture, on to priority area 3, staff, and then priority area 4, community engagement. Again, student outcomes, you can see there are the types of things that are included under there. I really call this the student achievement section. It's where we look at test scores and things of that nature. So I'm just going to walk you through those. The first one that we set for ourselves was to increase our graduation rate. And so, as you can see, this has been a good news story, and we are up almost 4% over with our graduation rate, over 84% now. And you can see we were in the 80s when we baselined this at 2015-16, and you've seen many of the initiatives that we have been have going around high school graduation, but I call this one the old blocking and tackling. Really, it's our schools, buildings, working hard, looking at students individually, what their needs are, and then giving them those things that will get them through to graduation. And a lot of at-risk student monitoring that goes into that. So really been a good news item, and that's what we're trying to get through kids to graduation ultimately. Completion rate, it has gone up a little bit. You know, not as much as we would have hoped maybe, but a lot of, if you think about completion rate, what goes in there are late graduates. We're actually moving more kids to on-time graduation than probably late graduation, and then GEDs. And GEDs has been, we probably get about 25 to 35 GEDs a year, kids that get their Gs, not a big number. And really, what we've been focusing on this year is sort of the redesign of our alternate schools. You know, we moved from ombudsman to our own in-house process now, so we continue to work that and looking at our most at-risk students and maybe kids that just need a little more time to graduate. This is probably, if I had to look at one indicator in the whole deck, this is probably the one I think is most significant if you really think about it. This is the gap between kids that are what we would call on economically disadvantaged, free and reduced lunch. This is a gap between kids that weren't in that situation. And when we started this, the gap was significant. It was over 25%. This past year, it was down under 9%, which is significant, which really shows about the engaging pathways that we've been doing out there through the district, and as much as also expanding internships, really trying to engage kids at all different levels of education. So this is a pretty significant indicator and one that we're very proud of within the district. Third grade reading scores. I call this one where you see the headlines. If you took a first blush, you'd say, well, we're not really at and haven't, you know, we've got a significant gap to where the state overall indicator ends up. However, if you look at the bottom part of that slide there, you can see our performance without our ELL kids. Not that they're not important, and I'll in a couple slides, I'll address how we're doing with that population, but you can see it significantly changes it. We have about 10% of our kids are what we would term EL kids, and the state has about 2%. So just that measure alone it discounts our rate by about 5%. So when you take that out, we come very much closer to the state average. And you can see certainly some of the things that we've been working on in regard to early reading SIPs, looking at summer reading programs, leveraging our map data, things of that nature. So this is one that really hasn't moved a whole lot. This is, again, the gap, what we call the achievement gap. And that's sort of stayed pretty steady. Again, the same interventions that we keep working very hard on with our early readers. Coming back to the ELL population, this was one that we were very pleased to see on the state report card this past year. The state has gone through a series of different indicators of how to measure this, and then 2017-18 they finally arrived at what I'll call the baseline year that we're using now. But essentially, think of ELL kids as being on a 5-year proficiency growth trajectory is what the state, essentially when somebody enters it, generally 5 years to get to proficiency, and then this is measuring how we're doing against that proficiency curve. And in 2017-18, 28% of our kids were there. This past year, we moved it to 46%. So a very significant achievement. And it's one that the state uses quite a bit in their summary of their results. And of course, we're the biggest driver of that. So we take a lot of pride in being able to move that, and a lot of work that's gone on in that category. When we really want to be not only at third grade, but across the board at proficiency at the state level at both ELA and math. And this would kind of give you a spectrum of at each grade how we do versus the state average. And then again, down below, I gave you a sense of if you took the EL population out, what the district would look like. And you can see it looks substantially different. At the bottom right-hand corner, when you add it all up and you look at every student in the district from 3rd grade to 11th grade, you can see how we're doing. And when you back out the EL population at the state level and at the school district level, you can see that in EL we're right on the state average, and in math we're exceeding the state average. So that's a pretty good indication that we're doing pretty good out there all in all. And then especially if you say, well, you're backing out the ELL population, yeah, but I just showed you in the previous slide, we're doing very well at getting those kids on track as well. So, so we're pretty happy with those results as well. Looking at the ACT scores, we had a goal to increase the number of graduates that were scoring 24 or higher. And you can see we've moved that from 414 to 437. What I like to point out here is the percent of graduates taking the ACT has gone from 67 or 66.4 to 67.5. That's gone up a percent. And what I didn't put on there is the average ACT score, and the ACT score in that time frame has actually gone up. So we've increased our participation rate and the average ACT score, which is great. Looking at AP, these are, really phenomenal numbers if you look at it. Number of percent of graduating seniors completing at least one AP course has gone from 52.4 to 55.4%, so up almost 3%. And you can see the number of exams that have been scored at 3 or higher, which is significant. You've gone from 1,500 to almost 1,900. So the AP program continues to thrive out there in the district, and the results, we're getting more kids to take it, and we're achieving the same great results. Moving to school climate and culture, attendance. Attendance has been one that we haven't been able to move the needle a whole bunch on. This is holding ourselves accountable to the 10-day standard. And what we would say 94%, that's really what we've, in our strategic plan, set as our baseline. The state has sort of since moved to a 90% indicator, but we think it's, kids need to be in school to be able to learn. I would tell you that last year we had a bad third quarter from an attendance standpoint, just because we had a lot of weather and other things. So hopefully we can bounce back from that this year. That's kind of the 80-20 rule. I mean, we kind of have 80% of our kids get there, 20% that aren't. If you looked at it from a 90% perspective, it goes to 90-10. So basically, looking at it from the state level, 90% of our kids are making that benchmark, and I would say 10% are in the chronic categories. And those are the things that we keep trying to look at through the school attendance teams, different trainings we can go to, whatever we can do to get engaged parents and kids in the importance of getting to school. So it's one we keep fighting hard on. Behaviors, actually, if you're looking at that from the baseline, we've actually seen a slight trend downward in behaviors, both in number of offenses and also from a number of student perspectives. So we like what we're seeing there. These are the level 4, 5, and 6, or the more significant behaviors. And so, we've been doing a lot of things around across the district. Are looking at our SAT teams and doing a lot of studying and around social emotional learning. Got a Bridges study and that's going on out there, and just other things that are going on out there. The Boys Town model, the Tier 2 models are out in the schools. So starting to see some fruits of that labor, and so we're encouraged by that. Staff, we're holding ourselves accountable to try to get a teacher profile, so to speak, of more reflective of our community. So when we baseline this, we had about 50 students that were what we would call racially diverse, and we've moved that up into the 60 range, and we keep trying to find ways to keep hiring keep hiring teachers, whether when we've started the teacher internship and the pathway programs, and really trying to develop our kids in our own district to take that teacher pathway. Community engagement, we want every school to feel supported. And although schools may not have a formal PTO or PTA, we know that schools out there have a lot of partners out there that are helping them, whether they're churches or whatever. And so when we have surveyed schools, the schools all felt like they had support from the community, and so that's important to us. And so we just try to keep fostering those partnerships, and we know there's a lot of good people out there in the community that are looking for ways to help in our schools. So it's making that network of connections to keep on with those partnerships. And then really the last few slides here are what I would call survey related items. So we have a lot of indicators in our that we're holding ourselves accountable for that are more survey related. So the first couple here, I would say things that we survey parents on that are important to us. So first item is just surveying that parents feel that we're holding their kids to a high expectation, and that's one that's trended, has been trending positive. And then also that parents feel informed about what's going on in the district. So again, that's one we've been able to move up somewhat, and it's been actually at a pretty high rate all along. So it's one we keep trying to work on, but all in all, we feel pretty good about the trend that those are moving on. Students, obviously we want students to feel safe in schools, and so one thing we're going to be doing with this round of surveys this year is we're moving away from Gallup. Gallup's very prescribed. It asks the same 10 questions. They're not open-ended. They don't allow us to really dive into some of the details for what's behind the way people are answering, and so this is one that we're going to delve into a little bit more about asking kids, and you'll see on the subsequent slide, staff, is why you might not feel safe at school. So is it something outside of your school environment? Is it something in the classroom? Is it something in the lunchroom, the playground, those types of things? So we really want to delve more into that, because obviously we want all our kids to feel safe at school. So something that we continue to work on, and I think this next year we're going to really dive deeper into that. And then just kids that feel students are holding them to a higher accountability level. Again, kind of in that range where we haven't seen a lot of movement on that. So it's not bad, just haven't seen it go to significant higher level. And then staff, again, we've had a staff survey, as I said, more tied to Gallup, so we're going to sort of move away from that this year and try to delve into some things that are important to us. Obviously, feeling safe at school, we'll delve a little bit more into that. Again, you see the question around high expectations. The third one there, we want everybody's feel that their opinion matters. So it's one thing to say, what we're trying to get out of them is, why do you feel your opinion isn't matter? You know, it's one thing to just say, to check a 4 or 5 or 3. It's okay, but it doesn't really allow us to delve more into that. So we'll, I think with all these survey items, we're excited about where we're going this next year with surveys. And then professional development, one that hasn't historically been high. I know we've looked at this process in the past, just one that has sort of hovered in that same range as well over the past several years, but one we keep trying to work on and understand more. And then again, the evaluation process, it's kind of that 60-40 range, so one that we haven't moved the bar tremendously on. We keep trying to figure out, you know, what is it that isn't in the evaluation process that somebody would want to see, and then again, where they would know to find information to be successful in their position. 82% like to get that higher, but we have to know what they want information on. So again, we'll be I think finding out a lot more this next cycle about in a deeper way on these surveys. So if I had to sum it all up, I would say, you know, we've got about 11 indicators that have really been trending positive. Some of the more significant ones, like graduation rate and whatnot. We've got a couple that are, about 8 of them that are in the neutral category, and I would say those are more in the survey-related items, so we kind of know directionally where we would want to go with those. And then about 4 in what I would call the trendy negative category, which would be the early reading. If you looked at it just on a headline basis, attendance, a couple of those, and so we have line of sight of where we want to go with those as well. So all in all, I think we're moving a needle on most of our indicators in a positive way, and I think we have good plans in place to keep the needle going on the ones that have been moving, and to try to dig in deeper on the ones that haven't moved or that have been stagnant. And so with that, I would stand by for questions, or otherwise ask that you acknowledge the strategic plan update.
I think it will be interesting to see after we've had a year of first and second grade SIPs at the 2 buildings and the test scores, and then the following year when they're in the 3rd grade taking the state testing, if we are able to move that needle, and hopefully we are. So
yeah,
that
we're about a year away, so it'll be the cohort. I guess they would take it not this spring or not this year, but the year after. So we should start to see that. But by all indications, what we've seen on that, kids are progressing through that curriculum. So we should start to see that to emerge at some point. So
as a board, I had asked you this question before, so I'm glad to know with the change in the surveying that we can get more details, because we are also concerned, we want our students and our staff to feel safe at our schools, and we needed to know why and what exactly so we could address those
I think
issues.
the Gallup poll it was good for a period of time for the district, and it gave us some benchmarking to, what things we're doing nationally. And we know for the most part we do very good nationally, but it doesn't give you a lot of capabilities to ask open-ended questions. In other words, if you don't feel safe, why not? Mm-hmm. And so, it's impossible to answer that. So we're trying to go this time to more open-ended questions, things around feeling safe at school or professional development. If you don't feel you're getting proper training, what do you want more training in, so we can actually make an impact? Because otherwise we're just asking questions hoping that they're going to change, and it's very hard to move when you have 3,000 staff, it's hard to move the needle incrementally just by asking them to rate a 1 through 5, because it's generally going to be the same curve year after year. It may change by 1% or 2. So definitely a more conscious effort on the senior team to move away from Gallup and just to try to delve more into those.
The thing that I thought was neat as well was that increasing graduation rates, I've heard murmurs in the public sometimes, well, you're lessening the standards, and that's why you're doing that. And obviously, if you then look at our AP scores and our ACT, which are testing on a national basis, we're not. If those are increasing, and our graduation rate, we're increasing both. We're not lessening the standards to get our graduation rate higher.
Yeah, and we're raising the whole boat, right? So it's not just one group or one, that is raising the graduation rate. It's really, it's the whole boat that's rising, which is great to see. Like I said, that one indicator is significant when you look at the gap graduation rate.
Good information. Thank you.
Monopolize. Thank you, Doug. Seeing none, do you have a motion to approve the strategic plan update?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
The next report tonight is the legislative update. Here to give you that report is Business Manager Todd Veek.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. We passed the deadline, so several bills came in since our last meeting, or in the last 2 weeks. So I am going to try to go fast. Stop me if you've got an issue. So I'm skipping to page 2 of the document and start with House Bill 1104. That bill would restrict schools' ability to require a medical release of information in order to participate in activities. We're recommending opposing the bill. It would mean if kids weren't required to sign the release, you couldn't share information between the school and the trainer and the doctor. So we think that's a key bill, and we've got it labeled as such. I'm going to skip 1115 because that's died. House Bill 1122 would require the Department of Social Services to investigate potential abuse within 30 days. We support that bill. House Bill 1134 it's been kind of amended. It would require schools they took out the singing of requested honor songs. And it's now that to allow students to wear beaded graduation caps to represent cultural significance. We had that as a key bill. The main argument was what could happen with a graduating class of 400 kids or so. What could happen to the length of the ceremony? We do, 4 of those in a day. We'll have to review that one now that it's been amended to see if it's still key, but it still has in it that you can wear beaded graduation caps. House Bill 1143 has died. 1152 would provide a state fund of $45,000 for employees that want to complete the Sentinel to access the cost of the Sentinel training program. We oppose that bill, not so much on the concept, but that if the state has extra funds, they should put that into the state aid formula, and then schools can decide if they want to use that money for that program or not, because they're not, the proposal is for 0% right now, and it was supposed to have been 2 if they went with the index factor. House Bill 1156 would prohibit physical examinations or screenings on students in school districts without parental consent. We're suggesting opposing that bill. Basically, it has too many questions. It's very, some of the examples of that: does it prevent school administrators from conducting necessary searches? To the safety and security of school and students, or due to the safety of schools and students? These are questions that should not be left to interpretation. There's several questions that we can't read the bill and figure out the answer to, and because it has to do with safety and security, we think it should be more clear. So we're recommending opposed. House Bill 1157 creates a provision to allow students that are not age eligible to start kindergarten if based on academic screenings and social emotional readiness. We're recommending opposing the bill. It would require schools, you'd have to test anybody that wanted to do this, you'd have to test them and have the bill got slightly amended today, but it did pass out. Like I said, there's no money associated with it, and you're going to have to test students if the parents want them to. House Bill 1159 allows residents of school. There was a time in the state when you pass an opt-out, it was forever. It got changed, I think, in 2002. So it would allow those residents to by passing a petition, get that back and get that on the ballot. Those opt-outs that were passed prior to that time. I would call it an opt-out ex post facto law. I mean, they passed the opt-out under the rules at the time, which you could have been referred at the time. They weren't. Should leave those alone. The dollar amounts are static in an opt-out, so as time goes by, they're dwindling as a real dollar. So it doesn't seem to me that it's probably worth the hassle. House Bill 1162 requires a parent or guardian's written permission for a student to opt in to sex ed, and defines the contents of abstinence education. We have that as a key bill, and opposing it. The South Dakota Board of Education established content standards, and districts have the responsibility to involve parents in the selection of appropriate instructional materials to teach them. House Bill 1163 would require, in addition to needing parent signatures, schools must publicize on their websites and student survey questionnaire or similar instrument that asks questions in 9 specific areas and the survey would remain accessible for 5 years. Again, we have it as key, we have it as opposing. The current law already addresses the need for parental permission. You'd have to maintain this on the site for 5 years, and the last section isn't clear of the bill. House Bill 1167 revises provisions regarding confidential communications between the student and certain school employees. Those would be school counselors, social workers, and psychologists. We oppose the bill, and we have it marked as key. It's too constraining, and has unintended consequences, which could prevent school counselors or social workers or psychs from communicating with other school officials. The bill also prevents communication with a non-custodial parent if the custodial parent did not give permission. House Bill 1173 would prohibit a school board from denying an open enrollment application from certain students with autism if they moved outside the school district in the preceding or the succeeding year. The district opposes this bill, and then we have it marked as key. It would give basically autistic students a right that no other students in the state would have. Essentially, it was just guaranteed open enrollment, despite if your schools are overcrowding or whatnot. That bill passed out of committee this morning. House Bill 1174 would change the enrollment eligibility date for kindergarten, moving it from September, 1st of September to the 1st of August. We support that bill. House Bill 75 defines dyslexia for the purpose of special ed. The district opposes this bill. IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, defines the disabilities, and in South Dakota rule, those criteria for the disabilities are defined. Dyslexia would fit under the specific learning disabilities disability that already exists, and it's just if you would qualify under that, you would be considered SLD or specific learning disabilities. House Bill 1177 creates four-year terms for school board members and requires school board elections and special school board elections that would be held within 120 days of the general election to be held with the general election in November. We oppose that bill. You're taking nonpartisan and combining it with partisan. You typically get a 70% turnout and a lot of advertising for a general for a general election. You'll have a lot of people voting in the school board election that won't know a lot about the candidates or their issues that they're running on. I don't think we're really overly opposed to even year elections, but we can combine with the city, for instance, like we do in even year elections. So the 4-year terms might not be a terrible idea. It might be actually a good idea, but combining with the general election, we don't like that part of the bill. House Bill 1186 is a placeholder. House Bill 1198 would repeal the 2016 limitation placed on school districts, where prior to 2016, the levy was $3 per thousand. Maximum levy was $3 per thousand. Now it's changed. Since in 2016, when the half-cent sales tax increase passed and schools in the general fund have received an additional $64.4 million in today's dollars due to that increase. In exchange for that, the capital outlay, or as part of that bill, the capital outlay levy was limited. So schools have, in 2020, now they've lost $26.2 million in taxing authority since 2016. And in actual taxes, where if they were trying to levy at their 2016 levy but can't due to the new restrictions, schools have lost $14.7 million. There's another cap set to come on next year. That's going to affect the smaller schools in the state, and when that cap hits, if nothing changes, schools will have lost $67 million in taxing authority, or if you look back at what they were levying in 2016, their mill rate, they will have lost $33 million in actual taxes. So you've already eaten away half, or will have already eaten away over half of the increase we got in the general fund by 2021. So we support this bill. There's another one out there. We'll talk about Senate Bill 94, which isn't quite as broad as this. It doesn't restore it to $3. We're supporting both those bills. And I won't talk nearly as long about that bill when we get there, since we've talked about the issue here. House Bill 1201 provides for the distribution of a list of possible reasonable accommodations to students with disabilities. We're opposing that bill, kind of makes it a menu of accommodations, and you should go through the IEP process or the 504 process. House Bill 1210 is, we have as another key bill. It requires that before a questionnaire is given and completed by a school employee in whole or part addressing social and emotional functioning, learning, or behaviors of a student, or which pertains to a student's mental health, the custodial parent must be provided a blank copy of the questionnaire. Like I said, we oppose it. As written, it would hinder the SPED and 504 process when evaluating a student qualifying for services. The bill should be amended to state it does not apply to a questionnaire, normed assessment rating scale, or similar document applicable to a student who is involved in an evaluation. House Bill 1213 would prohibit the School Activities Association from restricting or prohibiting the video recording or live broadcast of any high school interscholastic activity or event by any television, radio, internet. Basically, it would mean you couldn't charge for rights to cover it. We oppose that bill. We, call it our state universities charge to have their games aired. Why shouldn't the High School Activities Association? House Bill 1218 would establish certain requirements. Also it would raise our fees for being in that, because they wouldn't have that money to help offset them. House Bill 1218 would establish certain requirements for schools regarding parental notice of and access to certain tests. Another bill, we oppose that bill kind of for the same reasons as we talked about. There's a lot of those bills in there this year, and we have it as key. House Bill 1220 is a placeholder. House Bill 1228 would include students with hearing loss in reporting criteria for deaf and hard of hearing children. It just adds another, we oppose it, it adds another data collection. Data collection for IDA is quite extensive as it is, and this is say the kids that didn't quite make it, you'd have to report on them as well. House Bill 1235 prohibits immunization requirements in schools. We oppose that bill, and we have it listed as key. Schools look to trusted healthcare agencies such as the CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics, state and local health departments for guidance on health-related matters. The research and guidance put forth by these agencies supports and encourages students to be vaccinated in an effort to prevent spreading communicable diseases and keep students healthy. House Bill 1237 establishes a statewide learning advisory council, early learning advisory council. We support the bill. That bill's been in there several times before and hasn't passed, though. House Bill 1241 removes most of the paid requirements for newspapers to qualify to print legal and official notices. We take no position on it, wouldn't affect us. House Bill 1243 requires schools to provide instruction on South Dakota's tribal history, culture, and government. We suggest no position on that bill. House Bill 1255 allows 2 school boards involved in a land exchange to waive the requirement for an appraisal. We support that bill. We say if the value of the land is not in dispute or in question, why incur the expense of an appraisal when both boards are agreeing to the exchange? Coincidentally, we had an appraisal.
And the consent agenda.
Yeah, on the consent agenda, as well as the bill for it. House Bill 1256 would fund shooting sports programs in public schools and enhances outdoor recreational activities in the state by creating a new tax that would be deposited in a rod and gun fund. We take no position on that bill. House Bill 1258 creates a homeschool voucher program and presumably a private school voucher as well, under the guise of a safety account for students who experience an undefined reported safety issue. And if the school is unable to resolve it to the satisfaction of the parent and the student, the first year, the prorated amount left that we receive for the student, whether from the general funds state aid formula or the special ed state aid formula, would go to the parents for them to buy their student education at home or in a private school.
Who's a sponsor on that bill? That one wasn't that.
Weiss
Nice.
and Jensen. We oppose the bill. We think it's deeply flawed, and the bill should be a lot longer if that concept were ever to pass. There's so many questions involved in this bill, and I won't go through everything that's written there, but we oppose that bill. House Bill 1263 requires school district referendum elections on issuing capital outlay certificates to be held in conjunction with the general election. Very specific bill, kind of strange. If you're in favor of saving or of getting more people to vote, because more people vote in the general elections than any other elections, why not all elections? Why just specifically this one? We oppose it. And not just school district elections. How about city elections and county elections and every other election? House Bill 1272 opposes or is a placeholder that revises conditions for dual credit. The district opposes additional dual credit requirements and are restrictions that would limit student choice in course selection. House Bill 1285 is an amended version of House Bill 1163 and would, in addition to needing parent signatures, require schools to post publicly on their websites any student survey. Again, we oppose it for the reasons we've talked about before. House Bill 1290 is a placeholder to assist schools with rapid enrollment increases. We're suggesting opposing the bill or the concept. We don't know what the bill would look like. They kind of are, for years, schools complained that they were always funded on the prior year's ADM. They solved that issue for growing schools by funding them on the current fall enrollment. So now we're off to the Senate bills. Any questions on any of those House bills? Thank you. Going to page 17, Senate Bill 94. There's some other bills, but they've died. Senate Bill 94 is the bill I referenced earlier. It relaxes the restrictions on capital outlay, doesn't quite restore it to $3. It sets a floor to the maximum capital outlay of $275. Ours currently has dropped down to $270, our maximum levy. It increases the per student maximum tax on levy for those small schools from $2,800 to $3,800. And there's about 14 school districts in the state that because of their low tax base can levy only a levy amount under $1,400 per student. It would allow them to go all the way back up to $3 or till they hit that $1,400 mark. We support that bill. We have it as key. We were, it was submitted by kind of all the education lobby, and that's why we have that one as the key bill, because all schools were involved in that bill and drafting it for the same reasons discussed before. Senate Bill 105 is a placeholder for future bills affecting legislation. Senate Bill 111 creates an ongoing phase-in of new wind energy farm taxes for the purposes of local effort in the general state aid formula. It also would limit the phase-in to 60%. It wouldn't get to 100%. We're currently in the middle of phasing in all these other funds that were outside the revenue. In 2016, another part of that legislation was kind of a key thing, is that where they're equalized some of these major revenues outside the formula. If you were a school district and you happen to have a way station in your school district, you would do rather well there, and your per student funding would go up quite a bit. They fixed that in 111. They're phasing it in. They're currently 60% phase in. We said just let it go to the 100%. And they bit the bullet in 2016. Let it continue with it. Senate Bill 117 requires the Department of Education to establish certain programs for children who are deaf and hard of hearing. We have no position on that bill. Senate Bill 118 is a placeholder for enhancing education. Senate Bill 123 would create a fund of $750,000 for literacy intervention program. We support the bill. We're struggling for funding for we talked about our SIPS program earlier. It's kind of as long as it's available to all school districts. Literacy intervention programs are good. Senate Bill 134 is a placeholder. Senate Bill 135 increases the bid limit from 50,000 to 100,000 on public improvement contracts. We support that bill. Senate Bill 143 would create a provision requiring students who receive a failing grade or withdrew from a dual credit course after the deadline to pay the full dual credit rate of tuition for the course. The district supports the bill. Senate Bill 144 creates a provision in the state's subsidized high school dual credit program. A student who receives a failing grade or withdraws from a course after the deadline would not be allowed to take another dual credit course. We would oppose that bill. The dual credit program is limited to juniors and seniors who meet eligibility requirements. By not allowing a student to take dual credit course because of a failing grade limits their growth and learning opportunities. Senate Bill 167 revises a provision regarding eligibility for the South Dakota Opportunity Scholarship to include the use of either the composite score or the super score. We support the bill. It just opens up options for students. Senate Bill 168 locks in the equalizing of other revenue that used to be outside the formula to only equalizing 60%, the current amount it's at right now. We oppose the bill, the same reason we talked about earlier. Senate Bill 170 is the governor's bill to scale back a little bit of technical term there of the current and impending capital outlay fund taxing restrictions. The governor's bill would do two things. It would raise the $2,800 per student for those small school districts with a lot of valuation to $3,000 instead of the amount we were going to $3,800 in ours. And it would allow schools that have very little, basically two schools in the state would be able to levy up to $3.50 per thousand because they have very little valuation. We oppose that bill because we're in favor of the other two bills. This one is quite restrictive in most school districts. Most school districts that are of any size anyway are not positively impacted by that bill. Senate Bill 174 allows the capital outlay fund to be used to purchase instructional software in addition to textbooks. We have no position on that bill. There's a lot of leeway in what you can transfer in the capital outlay bill anyway, so it doesn't seem like adding to the list of things that can be paid out of capital outlay is that important. The Senate Bill 175 would allow public entities to post their legal notices on a website maintained by the Secretary of State for a $10 per fee notice. We support the bill. It would save us approximately $49,000 per year. I think back to the 90s when I lived out in Pierre, the legislature. You would go over there in the basement and pick up your packet of either yellow or blue bills, House or Senate bills. Take those, read those, wait to read about the changes in the, when you'd get the thing, you'd cut and paste that. They've been, they quit doing that a long, long time ago. And this is just getting the posting of local minutes into the, and their minutes are online too, getting the posting of local minutes kind of into the 21st century as well. I think that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Do you have a motion to approve our positions in the legislative report?
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Into policy.
All right, so we have a group of policies to look at today. Just a reminder, we do review these on a cyclical basis to make sure that the policies and regulations for items that we have listed are up to date, and see if we need to add, delete, revise, or update language. So today we are looking at IHBF, the General Education Homebound Education Policy, and there are no changes recommended for that. JLCC and its accompanying regulation, Communicable Infectious Disease, update the language to make consistent with policy for employees. JEB, Entrance Age Requirements, update our language to current practice. JEBA, Age of Attendance, again, updating language to current practice. JG, Assignment to Classes and Grade Levels, clarifying the language. JQ and its accompanying regulations, student fees, fines, and charges, again, updating language to current practice. So as you saw in your attachments, there's really no major changes made to those. So I would move that we approve these under the review revision of those above policies.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Just remind everybody, next Wednesday is the last scheduled task force boundary meeting here at IPC at 5:30. There's no school Monday, Tuesday, so I know parents especially might get that off their radar. So reminder, Wednesday's the last one. So please attend or participate by watching or through Let's Talk. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. I have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.